Hello the internet, my name is Wesley and this is day 5 of putting together a DIY synthesizer to donate to the Synth Library of Portland. Today I'm going to be talking about the AI003 looping ADSR module by AI Synthesis. To be clear, there's no artificial intelligence involved in the creation of the modules or the way that they operate. AI is just the initials of the owner and operator of the company. I'm going to be releasing one video every day, most days, until I've got this synthesizer completely built out and ready to donate. So if you'd like to see this project all the way through to its conclusion, subscribe and you can see what I build tomorrow. Pretty much every synthesizer is going to need an ADSR module because they can turn the raw output of an oscillator, which would sound something like this, just constantly going, right? So what I've done here is take this envelope generator and patch it into a VCA, which is going to control the volume of the sound that you hear. So whenever I send a trigger pulse into this module right here, the sound gets louder and then fades away. And we can do things like adjust the knobs to adjust how quickly that happens. Versus... And so it's not just the volume of the sound that we can shape that way. You can shape any parameter that has a control voltage input, but I'm going to stick with just shaping the volume of the sound because it's so immediately apparent what's happening. So essentially what happens is the attack is how quick the noise reaches its maximum volume. So that's a very fast attack. A slower attack okay. Now the release is how quickly the noise dies after I let go of the key. Versus So, next to these knobs in the middle, you might be wondering what they do. Well, the S is for sustain, and that's, unlike the other controls, it's not an amount of time, it's a volume level. So let's say that we've got like a somewhat longer noise. When I press the key, the attack will happen very quickly, it gets to maximum volume and stays there until I release. But if I lower the sustain level, after we get to maximum volume, now it'll go through a decay stage. So you hear how it starts out loud and then gets quiet? The time that it takes to go from max volume to the sustain level is controlled by the decay. So I can make a very quick little pluck. You hear that like loud pop at the beginning and then it gets quiet. Or if I make the decay longer, and it'll stay at that sustain level until I release. I hope that makes sense. It's a very brief, quick and dirty description of what an ADSR envelope generator does, but just keep in mind you can patch it into anything like a filter or whatever, what have you. Now, just to be clear, I've put 2 of these modules into one enclosure. That was just like a personal choice, but it comes as a DIY kit where there's just one of them oriented vertically. I would probably do this build a little bit differently knowing what I know now, but this is one of the first modules I ever built. Having 2 vertical rows is really not the way, because whenever you have wires that are coming out from over here and you need to reach these knobs, it's going to be a pain and it makes the module less performance friendly. So it's pretty affordable, but that does come with some caveats and trade-offs that I'm going to discuss here now, and I think there are some opportunities to change things up if there's ever like a version 2 of this module. So one of the interesting things about this module is that if I pull this gate input out, there's now a switch that can loop the ADSR and essentially treat it as an LFO. And that's coming without any input whatsoever. But if I put the gate input in, it does interfere with that, and that's one of the quirks of the module. There's also a manual trigger button, but you can see it's not working. When I pull the gate, so it kind of works, but then it hangs at the sustain level, so you can see like these are all kind of quirks. Like normally, intuitively you would think that when I press that button it'll just go through the full ADSR cycle, but that's not really how things work. So next up, the difference between gate and trigger inputs on this type of a module is usually that a gate is like, reacts to how long I hold the key. And doesn't complete its cycle until I release. Generally, a trigger input treats it as though you just tapped the key, but no matter how long you hold it, it does the same thing. But the behavior on that is a little bit quirky too. It wants to hang at the sustain level, so you just kind of have to put the sustain at 0 and mess with only the attack and decay. So the AI synthesis website has a little chart that kind of details all the little like quirks of what behavior happens when what button is pressed, when what thing is plugged in, but I don't think it's like super realistic to memorize that. So I think, 99% of the time you're just going to be using it this way. And probably not worry too much about manual triggering since it doesn't work when the gate input is in use. And pretty much you have to just pull the input completely if you want to use the looping function. A quick note from the editing stage here, the loop switch uses a double pole double throw switch, but upgrading that to a 3-pole double throw switch would allow you to break the connection of the plug in the gate input when you're activating loop mode. Then you could just activate the loop mode without having to physically pull the plug out. That would be very doable on a DIY version of the build, and I think it would be worthwhile on a future revision of the circuit. I can't think of too many situations where you're going to be using the gate and the trigger at the same time. I would probably recommend having a toggle switch to move you between these so that you could just grab this and move it, like rather than needing to grab that and move it over, you could just have a dedicated switch that accomplishes the function. But even with that, you can kind of see that there's like quirks, like, and now it's triggering when I move it. So some of these quirks do certainly impact the usability of the extra features like the manual trigger, the looping mode, and the trigger input. So in my opinion, the most stable and useful like performance configuration for this module is going to be just using the gate input and kind of ignoring the trigger and the manual trigger and just treating it as a normal ADSR, because it is like very usable and smooth and it has a great range. Like, it can be quick and plucky, or it can be like, really long and drawn out. You can get a very long release. So it's totally usable. It's a great module. I just wouldn't like rely on those extra features too much as a big selling point. My other like significant critique of this module is these little red buttons from Tata here. They cost 22 cents, and again, their primary virtue is their affordability, but this is the 4th button I've put in here. Like when I pulled this thing out of storage, the button was starting to stick, so I pulled it, put a new one in, and I don't know, maybe I was a little too rough, soldered it a little too hard, I don't know. But I've built a lot of modules and I tend not to burn stuff out, and I burned that switch out, replaced it, something happened with that switch too, and then replace it if you look at these buttons sideways, they're going in the garbage, and I don't think they really last, and I don't think they're like responsive enough to really like work as a long-term like performance control. Like I can't really trigger that musically. I can do it to make sure the module is working, and that's handy and all, but like I can't like bop that in a song, you know what I'm saying? So despite my critiques of the module, like I said, affordability, I mean, you can get just the PCB for 15 bucks, which really isn't that bad, and you can get a fully built, assembled, tested version of the module for $95, which if you're a Eurorack head is actually like not that much for a module. Most of them are a lot more expensive than that, but if you're willing to just get the PCB and buy your own parts off Tata, it's pretty darn cheap. So even though I do have like feedback and there's kind of pros and cons on the module, I think because of its affordability and the ease of building it, like there's only 2 ICs and everything, I think it's like a totally worthwhile module, especially if you're early on in your journey. Like it doesn't have any quirks that stop you from using it in its most reliable configuration. It's really kind of more the edge case stuff where you're gonna like find yourself running into limitations or like fiddliness. So I think it's a good module, it's worthwhile. But there are more refined options out there if money is no object for you. But anyway, because it is perfectly usable and it's not seeing a lot of play in my case right now, I'm donating it to the Synth Library of Portland. Thanks very much for watching. My name is Wesley, and I'm going to continue trying to do one video every day until I've got a rack completely built out, a full synth to donate to the Synth Library of Portland. So if you'd like to see that project through to its conclusion, click that subscribe button. Thanks for watching and have a good day. Goodbye.